Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of Unfair Advantage, where we explore the strategies, insights, and methodologies to give you an unfair advantage. I'm your host, Mona Hilton, the CEO of Advantage Anywhere, and we're so proud to bring you topics and guests that will stretch your mind and mostly grow your business. So if you've missed any of the amazing episodes of Unfair Advantage, or maybe you just want to binge watch on topics that will actually improve your business and life, check out the Unfair Advantage recordings at www.advantageanywhere.com/videos. And be sure to subscribe to our ever-growing YouTube channel for the very latest in information and tips and news on the hottest business, leadership, and AI topics. Well, Thomas Watson once said, nothing happens until a sale is made. And never has that been more evident than in today's senior living. We have rediscovered the critical value of sales at the community level. The question facing us now is, how? Well, if that's how you feel, you're in the right place, because today our special guest is Christa Daniello. Christa is the Vice President of Sales for the Osborne. She's a sought-after authority in senior living sales. Now, I personally met Christa in early 2018, and back then and even today, I am constantly struck not just by her knowledge, but her boldness in speaking the truth. And I'm happy to say Christa and the Osborne, not only have they become a friend of mine, but also a client of Advantage Anywhere. And as a result, I've had the privilege of working with Christa very closely, very frequently ever since then. So I suspect that this would be an episode that you'll want to watch more than once. Now, today we're going to talk with Christa about how she trains and leads her team to stop selling and start listening. And I'm looking forward to diving into our topic. Welcome to the Unfair Advantage, Christa. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Mona. Geez, I feel so good now after that lovely introduction. I can't believe it's been since 2018. And although I've been at my place for 25, I think I'm going on 26 years. I've been in the industry now. Oh my gosh, almost 30 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's going so fast.
I know, and yet you're so young.
I love you more now.
Well, we always have so much fun when we talk, Christa, and I just love our conversations and some of the cool things that you share with me. But today's special because we get to share our conversation with our audience. But I really want to get right into it. But I think it's really important for our audience to know a little bit about you and how you got involved in the senior living industry. So tell us a little bit about your background, and your wild stories about how you got into senior living.
Okay. So, I think most of us probably didn't grow up saying, I want to be a senior living executive. But here we are, right? And I love my job, by the way. But my background, as Mona knows, is very interesting. So I have a couple different degrees, one in music, theater, dance. I have another in exercise physiology, and I have a master's in psychology. And as Mona knows, we've talked about this before. When I was going back for my master's, I was managing health clubs, and I said to my dad, who at the time, he was a manager of cardiology, he said to me, well, how about you go down? I know this person who's in a nursing home, and they're looking for a director of admissions. And I said, what am I going to do in a nursing home? At that time, I'm in my 20s. Let's remember that. I'm managing health clubs, no less. And my father's telling me to go to a nursing home. I'm like, what am I going to do in a nursing home? I go, they hire me. And I think, oh my gosh, now what? And come to, 30 years later, here I am, because there's many things that I realized. And one of the things was most of what I've done in my life is about connections and about people. And many people will say to me, oh, you're not using your psychology degree. I said, oh, my Lord, you have never spent a day in sales, especially in retirement. And I think what I have learned and why I'm here so long is because I enjoy is the connection, and how to make that connection really mean something for not just myself, but for the clients as well. So here I am, Mona, all these years later.
We've talked about this before, but I think psychology and sales, psychology and marketing are the perfect marriage because it helps you understand and get to the root of it. A lot of the things we're going to talk about today, I believe you've developed as the root of which was your psychology background. I think it's huge. I know this, I've never told you this before, but my freshman year of college, I was a psychology major as well. And I transitioned from that to marketing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of psychology and how you can use it to help you understand people and therefore connect better. But I know you have developed in those, whatever, 20 something years, we'll just call it that, a lot of different techniques, one of which is what you call your active listening.
Yeah.
So what methods, using your psychology or that you've developed, do you use to build rapport and trust with your prospective residents and their family members?
Yeah. So, I think that, a lot of people, when it comes to selling, they have a very specific way they're selling. And I think for us, for me specifically, it really is about active listening. Active listening. I think we all hear people speaking all the time, right? And I mean, we're bombarded by social media and people talking, that it's almost like that car alarm that we've gotten used to that nobody pays attention to anymore. I don't even know why we have car alarms anymore because we tune it out. And I think that's what happens in this day and age. And I think when it comes to sales, if you think about it, most people are focused on the selling aspect. They're not focusing on the listening aspect.
Right.
Every sale should start with active listening. You cannot sell if you don't know what that person is looking for. Just because they're all looking for maybe a retirement community, that does not mean they're all looking for the same thing. So that active listening to me is basically everything.
Yeah, earlier today, you were talking about when you go to buy a car. Tell us a little bit about that. Share that story again.
So when you go to buy a car, tell me what you think of, right? I mean, I think that's when you think of sales, the funny thing that comes to everybody's head, and they use this term all the time. Oh my gosh, that person's a used car salesman.
Yeah.
But what does that conjure up? What that conjures up basically, that notion of somebody not listening and just trying to sell you what they have to sell at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They're selling you. So I'm walking in. Let's do an example. I walk in to a place where they're selling cars, and I'm saying, hey, I have a young family. My daughter plays basketball. My son plays baseball. I have a lot of equipment. I go all over the place. And instead of trying to sell me an SUV, they're trying to sell me a beautiful brand new BMW that's sitting in the showroom that's a convertible. And I'm saying, now, how did that work for my lifestyle? So what I take from that is they have to make that sale to get a quota, but they don't really care about what I'm looking for. And now I've walked out of there because I need a vehicle, just like somebody needs a retirement community, but I don't need what you're trying to sell me. I need you to sell me what I want. And that's the big difference.
I think that's a great example because in many ways they're putting their product in front of the people. And that's your whole thing, is focusing on the customer and what they're interested in.
Absolutely.
So how do you teach your sales team to focus on understanding the customer first rather than just pitching the product?
Right. So, many sales people, especially at retirement communities, they'll have sort of a form that they go by, and they're asking a lot of questions, right, on that form, because it's like, I need for my information, I have to have date of birth. I have to have, what did you do? What was your job in your prior life? What are your hobbies? Where do you live? What I try to teach my staff is, instead of asking those questions one by one, have a conversation. You can get the same amount of information that you have on that piece of paper without looking like you're just asking a bunch of questions to get the information you need. So instead of presenting it as, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and you're going to answer me, what I tell my staff is, have a conversation. Pretend it is a friend. Pretend it's a new person that you're meeting and you're having that conversation for a first time. You're not going to ask them, what's your date of birth? Where do you live? You're going to say, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about, what your life is like, what a day in a life is like for you. Have a conversation, even if it's a phone call. Because remember something, you never get a second chance at a first impression. And I know we've heard that before, but it's so meaningful. So even if it's on the phone, do not give your salespeople this piece of paper and say, you must ask all these questions. Say, I'd like to get all these questions answered, but find a nice way to have a conversation and ask it during that conversation. It's conversational, not questional. That's how I would say you understand the customer story better.
Yeah, I love that. That way it doesn't feel like they're being interrogated too.
Right.
I mean, especially with seniors, like you said, they love to talk about themselves, but they don't want to feel challenged.
Right.
So that's a great way to do. I love that.
Yeah. How would you feel, Mona, if somebody said, what's your date of birth? I would probably hang up the phone.
I would say it's none of your business.
That's right.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think we forget that in the sale. We're so, like, going back to your whole car salesman analogy, we're so focused on selling them something. And maybe there's a lot of pressure, whether it's quotas, whatever it is, that we forget the human side. And you do such a great job of really bringing that out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So this whole philosophy on stop selling, start listening, there's got to be objections that come up. So how do you handle objections? How do you teach your team to deal with that again, so that they're not interrogating and they're not challenging, but they're dealing with the issues?
Well, there's a lot of objections, and I'm sure anybody who's listening to this has heard all the same things. I'm not old enough. I'm not ready. My house is too big. One of the things I always say is, we hear this all the time. Oh my gosh, my dining room table won't fit, right? And if you're doing the listening the right way, and if you're teaching your sales staff what things really mean, they're going to figure out it's not about the dining room table. It's not about the dining room table not fitting. It is about them hosting. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's a religious holiday, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. What it is letting go of that family time. So what you have to focus on is, that may be an objection, but how can you accomplish what they're feeling, what they're looking for, without having the dining room table in their apartment? So it's not about the dining room table. And if you've been actively listening to them, you'll understand that. So if it's that objection, you may say, you know what? I get that. I want to host too. So I'm going to show you our private dining room where you can still host that family meal and have all of your family around you. And guess what? You can work with a chef and they're going to cook it for you, and you won't even have to do the cleanup, but you're going to enjoy that time with family. So when I say objections, I mean, and there's some objections you can't get past. So, let's be honest, right? But if you're actively listening, you can figure out, okay, this is what they're talking about. Now, how do I specifically speak to that without saying, oh, no, you're wrong. Oh, well, we'll find a way to fit it in. No. It's not about that. So now let's figure out as a community how we meet that emotional aspect and still meet that specific person's needs. So to me, that's always like a good example of figuring out, ways to kind of get around that, but to speak to the heart.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't, that's just not exclusive to senior living. That's in every area of life. And we're always selling something, right? So that's true in every area, to get to the heart of the matter and not just trying to, push something or come up against obstacles, like you said, that we can't address. So I love that philosophy too. The dining room table is such a great way of looking at things. So, let's talk a little bit about the metrics. So you teach your people this. We've been through a lot, not the least of which has been COVID, and all the craziness that's come up in the last few years. What impact have you seen on your metrics, on your performance with this approach?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. So the first thing I want to say is, I think any of us who've been in sales and in retirement communities, we've seen a very big switch in the sales cycle. So the sales cycle, which used to average, I would say pre-COVID, and even before COVID was happening, I think we've already started to see, because people are living longer and they're staying home longer, a change in the amount of sales cycle, especially for independent living, right? So it used to be 6 months to 120 days. Now it's more like a year to 2 years where a full cycle takes place. And instead of looking at that as a challenge, I look at that as an opportunity, right? Because it's more opportunity to make meaningful connections, make meaningful engagement with somebody, and really build that trust over time. And number one, you have to have the ability, first of all, I think it's really imperative and important to note here that without the metrics, you don't know. So number one, you have to make sure that you're using some type of system that has the ability to be able to manage all the metrics, so that you know what you're dealing with and that you know what those changes are, that you're able to pull these reports and to be able to compare. Because how am I going to know what my impact on my metrics are if I don't actually know what my metrics are?
Track them, right?
Exactly. So number one. Number two, you have to be flexible, right? And so one thing that I realized is, over COVID, if you thought active listening was important before COVID, during COVID, there was nothing else to do but to connect with people via phone or via Zoom, right? And we all had to make that very quick flex and change to that.
True.
And so that gave us a lot of opportunity to make those ongoing connections, to check in, to not say, hey, are you ready? But to say, how are you feeling today? Is everything going okay? Is there any way we can help you? And all of that listening, the impact, I actually saw the impact. Number-wise, I can tell you that we had more closings last year than we had since 2015.
Wow.
That's after COVID, okay?
Wow.
Well, So I think that really proves that active listening and that engagement and making sure that that's a priority will eventually make an impact. Is it going to make an impact in 6 months? No. But is going to make an impact over that sales cycle. And it's stop looking at it as it's a challenge that can't be met. Look at it as an opportunity. I have now an opportunity to build trust over a year. Not, oh my God, I'm not going to make a sale for a year. Nope, I'm going to build a relationship for a year. Because if you look at it that way, it's going to happen and you're going to end up with more closings.
Right. And there's something else that you were talking about when we were talking earlier about the comparison with, both of us have kids that are in college.
Oh,
and you made this really cool comparison with moving a kid into college versus a child, in this case, an adult child, moving their parent into senior living.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's funny you say that. And this past weekend, I took my daughter to see Lion King again. It's my 4th time, but she wanted to see it again. But again, circle of life. And I think it's really no different and maybe even more difficult. So think about it. Even kindergarten, you drop your child off at kindergarten, that first time you're like, oh my God, first time they get on the bus, they're moving into a new college. My daughter's going for the first time, Mona. I know your daughter's a junior. I think she's a junior.
Senior, going into senior.
And you drop your child off and you're crossing your fingers and you're praying everything's going to go well. Now that child is really on their first leg of their next step of their journey. We're kind of dealing with the opposite end, kind of like the last leg on their journey. So there's a lot of little pieces of things that you have to remember. I think this will bring you back to the fact that, think about it. College kids going to their first time on a campus. Now you've got social media. Now you've got email. We didn't have it back in our day, Mona, when we went to college, right? You'd write
I'm
letters.
not admitting to any of that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. Okay, so just me. When you go back and you look, the more you feel connected to a community, which is a college or a retirement community, whatever it may be, the less nervous you feel, the less nervous the adult influencer feels. Meaning that, if I've connected a person with, it's not going to be a roommate, but it might be their neighbor, somebody who's like-minded, and they've been to a bunch of your events at the community, and they've met other staff at your community. Well, they're going to feel more at ease. So's the adult influencer. But there's a second part of that. So now it's like, it was the kid going off to college and it was the parent bringing them. Well, now it's the opposite.
The roles are reversed.
Right, exactly. The roles will reverse. And I think we think about how resistant a kid can be at 18. I'm an adult now. You can't tell me what to do. Well, guess what? That's the same thing with an adult. You can't tell me what to do. I'm your mother. You're not involved. And I think as a sales counselor, it's our job to also help the adult influencer understand you have to allow your parent to also still feel like they're in control. Just like that 18-year-old wants to be in control, we know that they're not always in control, but sometimes you got to let them take the wheel and just back them up on it. So they're so similar. And again, it just goes full circle, and you always have to kind of keep that in mind. So I just always thought that that was a really interesting sort of dynamic.
I think that's so good. And you just touched on something else. You kind of went through it really quick, but I want to make sure everybody caught it. You talked about how prior to a kid going off to college, like both of our kids are athletes, the coaches are reaching out to them. The other students they usually pair them up with a mentor, and they're just kind of easing them into it. It's no different. It's really no different. Like you said, to meet other residents who have similar backgrounds or were in, similar professions, whatever, that is so huge, and it makes them feel so comfortable. As you know, Christa, because we've talked about this many times, my mom just moved into senior living, and that's what got her, is she found other people had similar interests. It was all arranged, of course. And she saw them happy and loving their life, and she started to live vicariously a little bit through them, and that's huge. We can't downplay that at all. I think that's
you can't, and it's control the controllables, right? So I was saying to you before, it's funny, cue the deer. Okay, I want everybody who gets off of this unfair advantage, wonderful podcast or presentation, whatever it may be, that you go and you look on YouTube and you look up Funny Farm. God, I'm really dating myself. And you look up the actual cue the deer, okay? And this video will pop up. And what this video shows, and I think it's really very relevant to our conversation right now. And Chevy Chase is an author, and he has this idyllic thought in his head about going to Vermont from the city, and he wants to live at a farm, and he wants to have this beautiful place where he can write. Of course, it doesn't work out, right? It's not for him. It doesn't work. He wants to sell the house. So what do? They get everybody together. They control the controllables. They're not presenting something not specifically real, but they're making it happen at the time when the new prospective buyers are coming. So he's at the window with his walkie-talkie. He's got people outside with walkie-talkies. They see them pull up. They say, okay, get ready. Cue the deer. They pull up, the deer come through. They get out, they go, oh my gosh, did you just see the deer? Cue the ducks. Now the ducks go waddling. They're in heaven. Then he's sitting with a pipe reading a book. They knock on the door, they come in. Oh my gosh, look at how relaxing. So I don't think it's about presenting something that's not real, but it's about presenting your place in the best way that you can that speaks to somebody really specifically. And that to me makes a huge difference, because they're going to feel comfortable if they connect with somebody in your community.
Yeah, that's the ultimate in staging, right? Just like you stage a house.
Yeah,
it's no different. It really isn't.
No different. It's no different.
Highlighting the positives. I love that. Yeah. So Christa, let's talk about my favorite thing. I've been dying to get to this.
Okay.
So Christa has, just for you guys who don't know, Christa has, created this concept that she calls Smile. And I want you, Christa, I want to spend some time and kind of explain the whole concept behind Smile. I love this, guys. If this is the only thing you catch from today's episode, this is worth the price of admission. This is good stuff. It's going to really, it kind of recaps everything. I'm going to quit talking. Christa, tell us about Smile.
Okay. So Mona knows I'm part of a group. It's like a nonprofit group for I think it's like just one community organizations across the nation. And you apply to be part of this program. And one of the parts of this program, we visit a bunch of different communities, and it's not salespeople, which is what I love. It's people from executive directors to CEOs to all kinds of C-suite people. And you come up with an idea. And it's a group idea, but I did come up with SMILE, the acronym and the sort of idea for it. And then we presented it, and now it's part of Navari. So I will say it will be part of Navari, but I did come up with this concept. What we wanted to accomplish, and what I think is really important, is coming up with something that's easy. I think we overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
Many times as community, we want to, make something big and complicated, and it doesn't stick because it's too big and it's too complicated. So I think it's about coming up with something that is throughout your entire community. It cannot just be sales. Sales can't be the only one making that customer experience important. It has to be everybody in your community from the CEO down. So we came up with SMILE, and I'm going to grab a t-shirt. I'm going to tell you what that means. So S is actually for stop. I don't know if y'all can see this. Okay. M is for make eye contact. I is for initiate conversation. L is for listen, and E is for engage. And here's the front of our little t-shirt. So a great idea, guys. Maybe what you want to do is come up with your own acronym, give out t-shirts. Most importantly, what does it mean? Can everybody remember this? Can everybody do this? Because I think if you can remember that little acronym SMILE, it tells you you have to listen. It tells you, stop if you see somebody. I don't care if it's a vendor. I don't care if it's a visitor. I don't care who it is. It creates an environment. And when you create an environment, and that starts at the top and goes all the way to the bottom, that has a huge impact on your customer experience. So, that's how that kind of came about. And I personally, I think it's brilliant.
I do too. I told you earlier, I wish I'd come up with that, or I wish I could have stolen it, but it's already out. Everybody knows it's yours. So SMILE to me encapsulates a whole idea in a very easy to understand, easy to remember. One of the things you talk about is that we're living in their home. This is not, you might want to explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, and the reason why I was telling you, Mona, that I think this is so important is because I think if we remember we're guests in somebody's home every single day we're on these campuses. We are not going into a store. You're not going into a corporate office. If you are working in a retirement community, you are walking into somebody's home every day. So right. I think it is extremely important to remember that, from the porters to the dining staff to the management to anybody who's coming into the community. So I'm going to tell you a story because I think this just came to my head, and it's one of the things I talk about during employee orientation. And I think this tells a lot. So one of my first times coming here and actually interviewing, I was doing a tour, and I'm walking down to the exit. My CEO had, just finished, and I see a woman. She has her shoe untied, and I see this man in a blue jumpsuit, and he stops and he says her name. He's like, I'm going to say Mrs. Jones because we all know HIPAA. I can't say a real name. Stop for a second. Your shoe is untied. He got down. He tied her shoe. He said, have a great day. And he smiled, and she walked away. They thought nothing of it. I thought everything of it.
Yeah.
That guy in the blue jumpsuit happened to be a facilities worker who was an electrician who stopped, tied her shoe, thought nothing of it. What does that tell me? That told me everything I needed to know about that community. That's somewhere I want to work. That would be somewhere that I would want to live. So that concept, I think, really bleeds through sort of everything in the daily life at a retirement community.
That speaks to the culture of that community.
100%.
That everyone's involved. Like you said, it's not just about sales.
No.
This is just some random person who noticed an issue and addressed it. I love that.
I'm going to say something, Mona, that when it comes to SMILE, it can't be sales. It has to be, you have to have the buy-in from your CEO. So if you're an ED and you're listening to this, if you're a CEO and you're listening to this, or you are a sales director or a marketing director or whatever it may be, you have to have the buy-in from the CEO, and the CEO has to understand that this customer experience has to be the number one thing, your number one culture, because in retirement communities, what is going to be the number one thing that you do? Like college again, it's all about word of mouth. You're going to want to go where people have good things to say, right? Why do I want to go to a specific college? Same reasons. Why do I want a specific car? It's when people tell you it's a life. It's not a bottle of shampoo. If I'm going to spend the rest of my life somewhere, I want to know it's a place where people say, hey, I love living here and here's why. And I think that concept brings that to life.
That's awesome. You actually stole my thunder because I was going to ask you about the future of senior living sales, but I think you just described it in building the culture and, making sure that it permeates every area, every department, if you will, of senior living. But I'll go ahead and ask the question anyway. So things are changing. Senior living sales is changing. The customers, the consumers are changing. How do you see active listening becoming more of a crucial role in the senior living sales marketing process? What trends do you anticipate?
So I think there's going to be a lot of trends. And I think, over the 28 years that I've been here, I've always seen, I think it's about like every 7 to 8 years, you really see sort of a change. People are living longer these days. So, some of it's going to depend on where you live. Some of it's going to depend on what market you're in. But I think at the end of the day, your sales cycle is always going to become longer. I think that you're active listening and having that next step. So I think everybody looks at closings as when they sign the contract and they give you a check. Well, I don't look at closings that way. I look at closings as you just initiated the next step and you finished that step. So for instance, if somebody came for a tour, when they leave that door, you should never let them leave without a date and like what you're going to do next. Whether it's, hey, I'm going to call you in a week. Maybe their wife had a hip surgery scheduled. I'm going to call you in a week because I really want to check in on you and see how your wife's hip surgery went. So I think it's going to be honest with you, you're going to have to be more and more engaged. And I'll tell you why, a lot of reasons. Your biggest competitor is always going to remain home, always in this market. People are living longer. So there's going to be trends that are market trends, meaning like they're trends that your CEO and everybody in your business is going to have to look at, which is, of course, modernizing, changing programming. But what can sales do? Sales is going to have to continually figure out ways to individualize every person's personal experience. It is going to become more and more important to build trust. It's going to be more and more important to bring them into your community, to introduce them to other residents, to stay engaged. Just because you didn't make a sale in the year does not mean that sale's not going to happen. That sale may happen now if you look at the trends in a year and a half from now, and that's okay. Look at everything as an opportunity. Don't look at it as a roadblock. You have to figure out ways around everything because it is going to be more challenging. What I'll say about the future is, as it always has been, it's going to get more challenging. So it's up to you to figure out, how do I make sure I'm rising to that challenge?
So you raised a couple of thoughts. One of which is, to me, it's ironic as I'm listening to you talk, that in this day of social media and digital marketing and all of this, the truth is, if we're being honest, the truth is that the future is still in the human connection. We're wired for that. We're wired for relationship. And like you said, by developing that human relationship, the personal touches, that is what makes a difference. That's why they buy, not because they saw a cool post. The cool post might get them in as a lead, but the actual conversion, the close, is the relationship. And I think that's something we can't forget. And we can't dismiss it and say, oh, we'll just let digital take care of it. That's not how it works.
No.
The other thing you said is you were talking about scheduling the next step when you have that conversation. I heard this acronym called BAM FAM, book a meeting from a meeting. So you always, every time you have a meeting, you're booking the next interaction, whether that's a call or a meeting or whatever that is. So that reminded me of that.
I like that. Uh-oh, I got to add that in, Mona.
BAM FAM.
BAM FAM. I'm going to write that down.
I love our conversations. We always have so much fun, and we always like conquer the world and solve world hunger and everything every time we talk. But
exactly.
Well, we talked about a lot of things. Okay, and there's been so much, and it's always such a joy to talk to you, Christa. So if people were to take away one nugget they could only take one thing away from this conversation, just one, what would you want them to take away? Yep. I was hoping you would say that.
Smile. Again, I think it speaks to culture. And I think if you're not thinking about what that culture is on your community, I think you're going to have trouble in the future. There's going to be more and more competition, guys, and you got to really focus. And the easiest way to do it is to smile. That's it. That for me is, if I were listening to this, that's what I would take away from it. And I think I would try to figure out, okay, what is my smile? Your smile is going to be different than my smile, but I would say that that's the number one thing I would want you to take away. How do you gain that customer experience? Just if somebody's even on your campus for 1 minute, is smile.
Yep. I love that. And I've come to associate smile with you. One more time for the audience, can you tell us what the acronym stands for, the SMILE?
Yes. So it's stop, make eye contact, initiate conversation, listen, and engage. That is your SMILE.
Love it. What a way to end. We could talk forever, but guys, I told you this was going to be good. Like I said, we always have these kind of conversations, and it's just an honor to share the conversation with you guys. So I would highly, highly recommend you reach out to Christa. Her email address, her website is on the screen. Make note of that. Reach out to her. As you can tell, she is a wealth of information and a whole lot of fun too. Just don't get her started talking about her daughter. I do the same thing, so I think it's awesome. But I'm Mona Hilton. My contact information is on the screen. If you'd like to know more about Advantage Anywhere, or if you would like help with anything, Christa and I would just be honored to help you. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Unfair Advantage. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we wish you a great day. Thank you so much, Christa. Appreciate having you here. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.